Have you ever wondered about the true cost of your favorite pair of sneakers? In the world of sports apparel, one brand towers above the rest. Nike, a global powerhouse. Nike's influence stretches far beyond the realm of sports, embedding itself into the fabric of our culture. Its iconic swoosh is recognized around the world, symbolizing not just a brand, but a statement of style, performance, and aspiration. Yet, as we admire the latest designs and technology embedded in these products, we must also consider the labor that goes into making them. Nike, despite its worldwide popularity, has not been immune to controversies. Stories have emerged over the years about the conditions in which these products are made. Allegations of poor labor conditions, low wages, and sweatshops have surfaced, casting a shadow over the brand's shiny image. But beneath the surface of this success, there are some troubling questions. And it's high time we took a closer look. The late 90s brought a wave of controversy to Nike's doorstep. During this time, whispers of alleged sweatshop labor began to surface, casting a shadow over the sports giant's reputation. But what exactly is a sweatshop? In the simplest terms, it's a place where workers are subject to poor working conditions, often including long hours, low wages, and unsafe environments. Essentially, they're areas where basic human rights are often disregarded in the pursuit of profit. In the case of Nike, these allegations pointed towards their overseas factories. Countries such as Indonesia, China, and Vietnam were reportedly the grounds for these sweatshops. The workers there were allegedly subjected to harsh conditions, toiling away for hours on end, earning barely enough to make ends meet. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of workers hunched over sewing machines or standing at assembly lines for hours on end. The air filled with the constant hum of machinery, the sharp scent of glue, and the heavy weight of exhaustion. Workers, many of them women and even children, laboring for hours, their hands moving in a monotonous rhythm, stitching, gluing, assembling over and over again. The conditions were reportedly far from ideal, with allegations of inadequate ventilation, poor lighting, and excessive heat. Now, these were mere allegations at first, but they were enough to stir the pot. Human rights activists and even consumers began to question the ethics of supporting a company that could potentially be exploiting its workers. But why Nike? A key reason was its visibility. As one of the world's leading sports brands, Nike was in the spotlight. And with great power, as they say, comes great responsibility. The world was watching, and the world wanted answers. The controversy was a wake-up call, not just for Nike, but for the entire industry. It highlighted the human cost of cheap production and mass consumerism. It exposed the ugly underbelly of the global supply chain and forced us to confront the question, at what cost do we get our sneakers? This marked the beginning of a long-standing issue that would plague Nike for years to come. The real victims in this story are the thousands of workers subjected to these conditions. In the heart of this controversy are the everyday workers toiling away in factories that are often described as sweatshops. These workers face conditions that many of us cannot even begin to fathom. The term sweatshop conjures images of cramped spaces, poor ventilation, and hazardous working conditions. Unfortunately for many of these workers, these images are a harsh reality. Reports from various human rights organizations paint a grim picture of the working conditions in these factories. Workers are often crammed into overcrowded spaces, working long hours with minimal breaks. The lack of proper ventilation and safety measures puts these individuals at risk of chronic health issues, injuries, and in some unfortunate cases, even death. The wages that these workers receive are hardly commensurate with their efforts. Many of them earn less than the local minimum wage, struggling to make ends meet and provide for their families. The low wages, coupled with the demanding working conditions, create an environment of exploitation and hardship. But the impact of these conditions extends beyond the physical. The mental and emotional toll on these workers is profound. The constant pressure to meet production targets, the fear of losing their job, and the overall stress of working in such conditions can lead to anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. The treatment of workers in these factories is also a matter of concern. Reports of verbal and physical abuse are not uncommon. The lack of respect and dignity afforded to these workers is a stark reminder of the human cost of cheap production. In many cases, these workers have little or no access to effective grievance redressal mechanisms. They are left with no choice but to endure these conditions in silence, their voices drowned out by the hum of the machinery and the clamour for cheaper goods. The human cost of production became a central issue for Nike. As we delve deeper into this controversy, it becomes clear that it's not just about a brand or a product. It's about people, their lives, and their dignity. It's about recognizing that every product has a story, and sadly, for many of these workers, it's a story of exploitation and hardship. Facing mounting pressure, Nike was forced to respond. And respond they did, in a manner that was as multifaceted as it was controversial. Initially, the sportswear giant responded to these allegations with a firm denial, questioning the credibility of the claims and attempting to shift the blame onto the independent contractors who ran the factories. However, as the controversy refused to die down, Nike's response began to evolve. The company transitioned from a defensive stance to one of increased transparency and commitment to change. They launched a series of initiatives aimed at improving conditions in their supply chain. One of the most significant moves was the introduction of factory audits, a step that was then unprecedented in the industry. This involved independent organizations conducting regular checks on the factories producing Nike goods, assessing labor conditions, and ensuring compliance with international labor standards. Nike also made strides in enhancing the rights and conditions of their workers. They implemented a code of conduct for all their factories, which included provisions for reasonable working hours, safe working conditions, and a prohibition on child labor. They also invested in education and development programs for their workers, recognizing the importance of creating opportunities for advancement and personal growth. Moreover, Nike began to engage more openly with their critics, acknowledging the validity of some of the concerns raised and expressing a commitment to continuous improvement. They started publishing reports on their supply chain practices, revealing both their progress and the areas where work was still needed. This was a bold move that marked a shift in their approach to corporate responsibility. But as the dust settled on Nike's response, questions remained. While they had undeniably made progress in addressing the issues in their supply chain, many wondered if it was enough. The changes were a step in the right direction, but the journey towards achieving truly ethical and sustainable labor practices is a long one. Nike's journey towards better labor conditions had begun, but was it enough? Fast forward to today, where does Nike stand in its commitment to fair labor practices? Nike has made strides since the controversies first made headlines. Recent audits and reports suggest a more transparent and conscientious approach towards their labor practices. They have implemented a series of policies to ensure worker rights, such as the Code of Conduct for Manufacturers and the Worker Rights Consortium. These codes and consortiums are not just a set of rules on a page, they are a living, breathing part of Nike's operations. They enforce standards on wages, working hours, and the right to collective bargaining. Nike also opened its doors to independent monitors to inspect their factories around the world. Despite these efforts, criticisms persist. Some argue that while Nike has taken steps to improve conditions, the reality is that these improvements are not universally applied or sufficiently enforced. There are still reports of workers facing poor conditions and low wages in some factories. Moreover, the issue of child labor remains a shadow that Nike hasn't fully escaped from. While the company has policies against it, enforcement across its sprawling global supply chain proves challenging. The company is yet to completely eradicate this issue from its operations. Looking into the future, Nike has pledged to continue improving its labor practices. The company has stated that it is committed to creating a culture of empowerment, inclusion, and respect for the workers in its supply chain. It plans to invest more in its employees, providing them with opportunities for growth and development. Nike is also exploring innovative ways to monitor and enforce its labor standards. This includes using technology to track working conditions in real time and partnering with local organizations to better understand and address the issues on the ground. However, it's clear that these efforts need to be more than just promises on a corporate responsibility webpage. They need to translate into real, tangible improvements for the workers in Nike's factories around the world. In conclusion, Nike has made progress, but there's still a long road ahead. As consumers, it's important to keep asking questions and demanding transparency. After all, the journey towards fair labor practices is far from over. In the end, the question remains, at what cost do we enjoy our favorite products? We've journeyed through the saga of Nike, a brand beloved by many, yet marred by controversies over labor conditions and allegations of sweatshops in its supply chain. We've delved into the impact of these conditions on workers who toil tirelessly to produce the products we so readily consume. We've scrutinized Nike's response, a mixture of denial, admission, and promises of reform, and we've contemplated the current state and future outlook of the company, exploring the steps it has taken and the progress it still needs to make. But the tale doesn't end here. Each purchase we make is a vote cast in the global marketplace. Our choices can either endorse the status quo or demand change. As consumers, it's crucial to understand the true cost of our purchases, and as global citizens, it's our responsibility to push for better labor conditions worldwide.